Welcome aboard.
Good to be here.
Okay, so we do have time. Oh, John, I'm sorry. Oh, yes, that's right. We want to go back to the first item on the agenda. Second, all in favor? Aye. Aye. The minutes will stand as presented. We did want to have some time today for public comment. The last two meetings, we really haven't had an opportunity, so I know that there are a couple folks here who would like to say a few words. I'm going to try to limit each person's testimony to 5 minutes to be sure that we've got enough time. So we've got about 15 minutes left before 3 o'clock. So do we have anyone? Mr. Cushman.
Thank you. My name is Robert Cushman. I'm a former Warwick City Councilman. Also served on the Warwick School Committee as a chairman and a member of the Finance Committee. I've been analyzing the Warwick budget for about 8 years now. I've done some analysis on the new actuarial reports that come in. So through the chair, is it possible to pass this out to the committee?
Sure.
Can we get those passed out? Because I think what I'm talking about is relevant to many of the things that you talked about today in terms of critical status, in terms of reasonability. Let me just wait 1 second until we can get these passed out. And let me focus on, if we can go to page 2 for a second. And what I want to focus on is Warwick has 4 pension plans in its OPEB plan, and I've put the funding ratios. So when you talk about critical status, I think you're talking about critical status for individual plans. So in the case of Warwick, we have one plan that's in critical status. It's at 22.3% for police and fire 1. This is a closed pension plan. But my point is, you can't only look at, you know, Mayor Fung talked about this new law where we would have to fund to a certain percent, and I was scratching, you know, what it would mean to fund this plan. It would probably be about $80 million over 10 years. And my point is, you really have to look at, in the totality, all the funding ratios for all plans. So when you put OPEB in this, Warwick's at 35.3%. To me, Warwick is in critical status. And the reason I say that is that whatever you do for one plan in terms of legislating laws to fund it, it's going to affect all the other plans. You know, it's like we have 5 credit cards here. If you're going to mandate we make more minimum payments on one card, you know, we might not be able to make the payments on the other cards. So that's the whole point I want to make. Warwick is at 35.3% overall funding for all plans. Now, if you turn to page 3 quickly, our unfunded liabilities, accrued liabilities, just the total accrued, are approaching $1 billion. Our liabilities are getting worse. And what just happened as a result of the new assumptions, we're mirroring the state plan for 7.5%. We updated mortality tables. Our unfunded liabilities just went up $82.3 million. So we just put $82.3 million more on our credit cards. What does that mean? It means our annual required contributions are going to have to go higher. Now, the reason Warwick is such a good example, because, you know, we've heard the situation with Cranston, we've heard the situation with Providence. Everybody thinks Warwick's in great shape. We do make our annual required contributions. That's why Warwick is a perfect city, municipality, to take a look at all the other effects of doing that. So if you turn to page 4 quickly, all I did was, over the last actuarial reports, over the 2-year periods, I looked at the change in the unfunded liabilities. And if you look at the 3 newer plans, Police 2, Fire 2, and the Municipal plan, Police 2, the unfunded liabilities increased 900%. These are the new plans. These are not closed plans. So what does that mean? The amount of money to fund the annual required contributions is going to go up dramatically. Now, page 5, there's a lot of information on here. What I want you to focus on is the salary percent in each field. I have Police 2 in blue, then I have Fire 2 and Municipal. And if you look at those percentages that are keyed in here, this was a 20-year forecast that the actuarials did last year when they were doing pension reform in Warwick. But let's talk about what the requirements to meet annual required contributions are. For Police 2, it's 26.6%. That's the taxpayer contributions. The employees are 13. You're getting close to 40% of payroll to meet annual required contributions. Let's ask the question, is that reasonable? I work for a Fortune 500 company in Rhode Island. You know what my 401k match is? 5%. We're talking about a 26%. And going down in white on these columns, this does not assume the new assumptions. So what that means, it's going to get worse. In 2015, the police too is going to go up to 30%. When we factor in the new assumptions, it's going to get worse. The percentage of payroll that the taxpayers have to pay is going to get higher. Now, let's look at why Warwick, we've heard this from the administration. The mayor has testified we have self-correcting mechanisms. What are the self-correcting mechanisms in Warwick that allow us to make the annual required contributions? What it is that no matter what the cost is, every 2 years, we have actuarial reports that are done, and the taxpayers will pay 2/3 of the annual required contributions, and the employees will pay 1/3. What that means, like I said, is that these percentages are going to go higher. Finally, on this page, let's look at the pension reform. That's the column all the way in the right. I know Mr. Cenerini from Council 94 a few weeks ago testified that Warwick made pension reforms. Warwick won't save $1 into 2015, $49,000 from these pension reforms. If you go over to the left of the next column, taxpayer contributions are going to increase by $7.5 million. Let's go down to 2024 when we actually start saving $1 million. By that time, taxpayer contributions are going to be $25 million. What that means is these pension reforms were a publicity stunt. They didn't do anything to fix the problem. Now, I want you to take a note of those three columns that I have in violet over there under taxpayer contributions. I'm going to come back to those quickly. But let's go to page 6 now. Let's look at what's the effect, then, of Warwick making its annual required contributions. Since 2004, that chart shows you that property tax growth, local property tax has gone from $162 million to $214 million. I've heard the mayors complain about the state cut aid to the cities and towns. During that point in time, the state cut $15 million in aid to Warwick. Our property taxes have gone up $52 million, 3 times the cuts of the state. So we have to ask the question, okay, where is the money going? If you look at the chart on the bottom of the page, since 2004, 45 cents of every dollar we collect goes to pension and OPEB expenses. When you factor in salary, sick pay, longevity pay, and active employee health care, you're up to almost 92 cents. That other column with the arrow that says decreasing, less than 8 cents of new taxpayer dollars is going to all other city services. I know Mayor Fung probably totally understands this. I sat on the Finance Committee in Warwick. I sat on the School Committee. These annual required contributions are totally eating up all the tax dollars that are coming into Warwick. And Warwick is supposedly the model plan. So I got on the bottom, how much longer is this sustainable? I don't think it is sustainable. I think what we have to do is we have to look at other ways of fixing the problem. So what I did is I just put a couple of recommendations I think you really need to take a look at on page 7. The first one is the rate of return. We're looking at 7.5%. I know Mr. Leach went through all this last year during the pension reform, but Warwick hasn't received a 7.5% in years, which basically means is our unfunded liabilities are even probably higher than what they're being reported. So I think one thing that this panel has to do, I've seen other cities and towns' actuarial reports, they're using different numbers. I think they have to be uniform. If you're going to look at a legislation to fix the problem statewide, I don't know if there is any law right now, but I thought Providence went from 8.5 to 8.25. I know Warwick went from 8 to 7.5 to mirror the state. So just one of my recommendations is you better have consistent assumptions. Second, you really have to consider your OPEB contribution. So if you look at that table on the bottom of page 7 on the left, this was just for fiscal 2011. Warwick's closed plan, Police and Fire 1, is being amortized over 40 years. It's supposed to be amortized, according to Gatsby, I think 27 over 30 years. So if you look at the annual required contributions for all the pension plans and for OPEB, in fiscal 2011, to meet 100% of the annual required contributions, Warwick needed to put $23 million more into the plans. Maximum tax increase by state law, Warwick can raise $8 million. This can't be done. Now, if you go over, if Warwick was to set aside the amount of money that's recommended in an OPEB fund, whether it's a trust fund or whatever, you can get into that later, we should have $59 million in the bank now. We have zero. So, when we talk about, trying to catch up and trying to do some things, it's getting to a point where I think it's going to almost be impossible. on page 8, and this is the thing that really bothered me, there are a lot of things that I found out when, you know, the actuarials came. It's the same, Gabrielle Rhode, I think they do the states. They also do Warwick. But it seems to me there's a lot of things that an administration can do to maybe skew what's going on. And if you read number 3A, in the OPEB evaluations for Warwick, they're basically saying it's a closed group. That is totally false. There's nothing in the collective bargaining agreements going forward that make that a closed group. What that's saying is that no new employees hired in the City of Warwick are going to get health care benefits when they retire. That is absolutely false. What that is doing, it's underreporting your unfunded liabilities, and it's underreporting your annual required contributions. No, you want to talk about cooking the books. This is cooking the books. Let's look at B. This is the actuary saying it. We feel it's important to point out that due to an amortization policy, several large gains from 6 to 10 years ago are scheduled to be fully amortized before large losses from the past 12 to 20 years. And what's happening, it's going to cause a spiking in years 2021 and 2023. If you turn back to page 5 there, those are the years where annual required contributions are going to go up $12 million in 3 years. Why would you put an assumption to do something like that? I'm going to tell you what I think's happening. There's a little bit of politics getting involved with here. We have people that are probably not going to be in office 8 years from now. We'll put a time bomb in. It's going to explode on somebody else. Just watch. So I think the point that the last gentleman just made about consistent assumptions, you got to take a look at things like that, because to me, this is what caused the problem in the city of Providence. You had deceptive numbers. And then lastly, the only reason why Warwick got a 20-year forecast is because some citizens met with some city council people and requested that the actuaries provide the data. The new reports that just came in right now, they give you a 2-year time period. So how are you supposed to be able to look at long-term? We're looking long-term here. We need to look at 20 to 30 years, annual required contributions, growth in the unfunded liabilities, to determine what kind of policies we really need to do to make this affordable and reasonable. And lastly, and I'm not hearing enough of this, you can't have it all. You can't have the pension plans that we're promising the employees now with lifetime health care. When you look at Warwick's unfunded liabilities, we're talking about $600 million. There is no possible way under the current tax caps that you could even ask the taxpayers to make those payments. I already showed you in 1 year alone, we would have required the taxpayers to come up with $23 million more. Last year, for the first time, Warwick did the new car tax. They removed the exemption. We raised about $8 million. Think about that for a second. We need 3 times that amount to meet the annual required contributions for all the pension plans and for OPEB. It's not going to happen. Already, only 8 cents on the dollar for new taxes over the last 8 years are going to all programs and services. The DPW, the police, the fire department are getting killed because their budgets are getting cut. The school budgets are being cut. And let me just put one final thing in. Warwick School Department's budget is below 2008 levels. So when we hear about when sockets out of control, the Warwick School Department and the school committee over the last 8 years has been right on holding spending, closing schools, and that's something that's a popular thing to do. You can't point this situation where the taxes are going up on the school department. 100% for the last 5 years of local taxes have a school department's been level funded. That means out of the last 5 years, 100% of the tax dollars went to the city side. And I showed you where they're going to. They're not going for programs and services. They're going to cover legacy costs. So the real tough decision, and I think the unions are going to have to step aboard on this, is we need to get some honest reporting, first of all. We can't have these deceptive practices. And you know what? You really have to realize that you can't have it all. If you want to preserve the pensions, you're probably going to have to give something up. And I think the OPEB is probably the first thing that you need to start. And legislatively, and I think legally, it's probably the easiest thing that you can go after right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Cushman. Any questions?
I have
Paul?
one. Mr. Cushman, in Warwick, does the city council approve CBAs?
Yes, they do.
And do they also set the budget for the city?
Yes, they do.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the public?